Hi, welcome to part 5 of my free video tutorial on needle felting. In this final video, I'm going to show you how to turn this little ball of wool fluff into your very own needle felted heart from start to finish. So if you did miss any of the other videos in this series, you can hop on over to those and watch them before you get started here. They'll cover things like how to properly use your needles, when to use each needle, and even how to blend this color of wool, this nice coral color that we're going to use. But of course, you can use any color you want to make your heart today. So with that, let's get started. So what you're going to do first is lay this piece of wool flat on your needle felting foam pad for support. And I'm going to kind of scrunch it a little bit into a really rough triangle or heart shape. So I'm kind of just pressing in the bottom two sides here to make a point and kind of just rounding out the top and pushing in the middle. Again, really basic kind of triangle or heart shape. And then we're going to start with our number 3016 needle. So that's the coarsest needle that you have. And we're going to start just by poking this wool into the foam pad. And as you poke down into there, you're going to kind of shape this bit of fluff into a heart with your needle. And I want you to remember, always push your needle in at a straight angle to what you're felting. You don't want to be bending or twisting it because that's going to cause you to break your needle. And you only need to be pushing in as far as the barbs on the needles go. Anything extra is just extra work. So I'm holding the foam pad in place on the table just so that it doesn't slide away from me. You can even put a piece of tape under it if you're concerned about that. But I'm just going to keep poking it from the sides to kind of make the heart shape. And then down on the top. And you'll notice that the more you poke one area, the more indented and dense it becomes as well. So we're just poking in from the sides to shape the heart to get started. We're not even getting our other fingers anywhere near the needles yet. So I'm just trying to ease you into the needle felting process because we will have to get our fingers a little bit closer to the needle. But right now we're just trying to make our heart shape. So poking at the top to make the indent, poking along these sides make the point, and then poking around the top to make those rounded parts of the top of the heart. So after I do that for a little bit, and then I'm going to poke in from the top. So all those fibers that we pushed in from the sides are going to be nice and interlocked together, and then when we poke down from the top, it's just going to meet up with those interlocked fibers and interlock these new ones with that. So it's just going to keep getting more and more firm and dense and pressed together. And you'll see even after this little bit here, see how it's already stuck to the foam pad you're working on? So there's the magic of needle felting for you. Just takes the needle and some wool, and you can make this shape that actually stays together. So after we have our basic shape here and we've pressed it down just a little bit, you're going to peel it carefully up from your mat, just so that if you pull it too hard, some of the strayed bits might kind of come out. So I'm just kind of pulling it gently to keep it intact. Also, if you were using an really old foam pad or a poor quality foam pad, it might pull up pieces of the foam into your project, and you don't want that. Okay, so now I just want you to pause for a second and notice how that feels already, even after just a little bit of felting. If you compare it to your wool that you started with, really light and fluffy stuff, this is actually getting fairly dense, and it stays in a heart shape when you're not holding it. So now, to continue, we're going to flip it over, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. You might need to hold your heart down a minute until you press it into the foam pad again. And our goal is not necessarily to press it into the foam pad, it's just what's happening at this point because it's still so loosely felted. You'll see that as you progress through making the heart that it will stick to the foam pad less and less because the fibers will begin sticking to each other more rather than into the foam. There won't be as many loose ones to punch into the foam. So you notice that the heart is getting smaller and smaller the more that we felt it, and it's going to be denser and denser. So we're just repeating the same process, going in from the sides to shape the heart. Work at whatever speed you feel comfortable with. I've been needle felting for nearly 10 years, so I tend to go at a fairly quick speed, but if you're just starting, feel free to go as slow as you need. There's no rush. Okay, so again, we're going to pull it up, flip it over, and we're going to repeat. Probably this will be the last side where we use our 36 needle, and then we'll be switching over to our next needle. Now the reason for that, I don't know if you feel it yet in yours, but you'll notice, if not this time, maybe the next couple times that you're felting, you'll notice when your wool, your project, starts to feel like it's kind of resisting the current needle that you're using. So like my heart here is actually, it's starting to get a little bit difficult to push my 36 needle in. There's a little bit of resistance because this is the coarsest needle, the widest needle that I have. And as the fibers are becoming felted together, there's less and less space for the needles to go into. So when you start to feel that resistance in your project, that's kind of your cue to move on to your next needle. So I'm sticking with this just for this last side, just to really try and do as much of that basic shaping as I can. All right. So now I'm going to switch over to my 38T needle, which would be this blue one, the light blue. So this is my next smallest gauge after the 36. So it's a little bit finer. I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to repeat. So now that the heart is becoming more dense, if you pick it up, you can feel now it's even more dense than it was the last time you checked. Now that it's becoming more dense, it's probably going to stick into your foam pad less and less, which means that you're going to have to start getting your hand kind of close to it, and therefore to the needle. So just use extra caution, because as I said, if you haven't noticed already, these are very, very sharp needles, and you don't want to poke yourself. So always try to keep your hands out of the direct path of the needle if possible. And when I'm poking in here, I'm almost angling my needle down. I'm not angling and twisting it down, but the angle I'm going in right now is slightly downward and straight downward because I have my hand up there, whereas before when I didn't have my hand, I was poking more straight in, even upward sometimes. So just kind of use common sense as to which way you should be poking your needle. So poking along the sides to shape it. You can also feel free to move your heart around, you know, if it makes it easier to work on certain parts. In fact, it probably will, because then you can keep your hand on one side of it and work around the other side without getting your fingers too close. You can see that our heart is really starting to come together here. Really nicely. Still working with our 38T needle. I also should mention too that if you had started the project with your 38T needle, you might have noticed that the felting, the shaping wouldn't happen very fast because this needle would be too small at that point. So there really is like a proper place and time for each needle. So just like it's becoming too difficult now to get the 36 needle into here, in the earlier stage it would have been difficult to get much felting work done with the 38T needle, because when the wool was more loosely spread, it needed a wider needle to pull the fibers together and to form the felt. All right, getting pretty close here. I'm just gonna turn it over again. And what I'm trying to do now is just kind of focus on the edges, because since we've been felting it flat the whole time, it's kind of got this one flat side, usually depending on which side you've been working on. So what I'm doing right now is kind of rounding off those edges and making them not so flat, so that this is a more three-dimensional heart rather than just a flat one. And as I'm doing that, of course, I'm shrinking it a little bit more, making it a little bit more condensed into this nice little heart shape. So I just slowly rotate the heart as I'm going, work my way around the edges, pressing in any parts that are sticking out. If you poke them in a few times, they'll be in farther. If you end up poking in a part too much, you can always add more wool too. So let me show you that real quick, because that's something helpful to know. Like, let's say that I didn't like how small my point had become here. I could just take more of my wool and I would just wrap it around like that. I would take my 36 needle again, because now I've got that fresh wool that hasn't been felted yet, and I would just poke that into place there to build up a little bit of extra bulk. And I would just do that enough so that it got to the same point where it was felted in. And since there's already some nicely felted wool underneath, it's actually going to felt in place there pretty quickly, because it's got all that nice wool inside to grip onto. So there. So that's just a little tip. You can always add on very easily. All right, so I'm going to go back to my 36 or 38 needle. So once I've got my basic shape all nice here, we're going to do another step, and this is one where I do want you to use some extra caution to keep your fingers safe. So I've got my basic heart shape that I want here, and I really just want to smooth it out a little around the edges. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick it up and put it on its side, being very careful to go straight into the heart. I'm just going to work along the edge a little bit like this. So my fingers are still on the outside of the heart, and I'm only pushing into the middle. I'm not going to angle the needle at all. I'm going to push it straight down, and this is just to work on the outsides and kind of smooth them out. And I'm just going to rotate the heart slowly and just kind of felt along the edge. And you could, if you're not comfortable with this, you can continue to work with it lying down. That's okay. For me, it gets a little bit difficult to really see it when it's on its side, when I'm getting towards the end. So use your own judgment there. If you're not ready to pick it up and felt like this, that's okay. And you can stick with felting it from the side. Do whatever feels right to you. And I'm going to felt that point nicely there. There, that's getting really nicely felted. So this is pretty much done. Now the last step is to switch over to our number 40T needle. This is our nice finishing needle for doing the last details and smoothing over. So you can kind of see that this is, you know, still got quite a bit of texture. It's a little bit lumpy. It's a nicely felted heart, especially if you pull up again your original wool and how soft and squishy that is. This heart definitely has some solidity to it now. And density that it didn't have when you started. So what we're going to do, repeat with your 40T needle. Now if you're still wanting to do a little bit more shaping, you can either stick with your number 38 for a while, or you can use your 40T needle to do some of that final shaping too. I'm pressing in about the same, with the same intensity I was with the 38T needle, just to do some really final shaping of my heart. But when I'm ready, when I'm completely done with the shaping, I'll show you what I'm going to do with the needle. Turn it over as needed too, to just keep working on both sides. But I think I'm pretty close now. So now what I'm gonna do, since I'm not really needing to shape the heart anymore, the shaping is pretty much done. My main goal now is to smooth out the surface and make it not lumpy anymore. So now I'm gonna lower the intensity of my needle a little bit. And what I mean by that is I'm not gonna push in quite as far. I'm actually gonna push in a little bit less far with the tip than I normally would. I'm only gonna go in a little bit on the surface, like maybe like 1/4 of an inch as opposed to 1/2 an inch. Just to kind of just to make the smallest holes possible. And I'm really just trying to finish my surface. And so I'm going to just do this all over the heart. Around the point. You can pick it up on its side here if you want to again and kind of work along the sides that way to really smooth out those areas too. Or you can keep working with it flat, whichever you prefer. And so this is the smallest needle and leaves the least amount of holes. And so it's really great for finishing off your work and making it really nice and smooth and uniform in the end. And I've seen people finish their felting projects all in different ways. Some people like it not to be as densely felted. Some people don't like the end result to be terribly smooth. I like mine to be really densely felted and really smooth. And that's just my personal preference. And that's how I'm showing you right now. But if you like it a different way, just stop whenever you want. And what this does too, when you only poke the needle in a little bit, it makes it so that it doesn't push the fibers all the way through the other side. If I push the needle all the way through, it starts to push the fibers out. See that? So I'm going to felt those back into place. So if you felt lightly and don't push all the way through, then that won't happen. So there we have it. I believe we are just about done. So there, your very own needle felted heart. So I hope that you enjoyed making this with me. As I said, I have those other 4 parts of this video series if you'd like to watch any of them if you missed them the first time. And you can also find additional information as well as all the supplies and more felting kits if you want to keep going with felting and want a little guidance. You can find this all on my website at grayfoxfelting.com. And there's also a contact page there, so if you have any felting questions, feel free to email me and I'll be happy to help you out. So thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.